Welcome back, everyone. It's time for the final third of Purgatorio, Divine Comedy. Let's finish up this book. Get on to Paradiso. Or is it Paradiso? It's just Paradiso. There's not an extra either. My bad. Anyway, let me just take 1 second to prepare. Alright, I'm ready to begin. Canto 24, Purgatorio. Our talking did not slow our pace. Our pace did not slow our talking, but conversing, we moved quickly, like a boat a fair wind drives. And recognizing that I was alive, the shades, they seemed to be things twice dead, drew amazement from the hollows of their eyes. And I, continuing my telling, added, perhaps he is more slow in his ascent than he would be had he not met the other. But tell me, if you can, where is Picardia? And tell me if, among those staring at me, I could see any person I should note. My sister, and I know not whether she was greater in her goodness or her beauty, on high Olympus is in triumph. She rejoices in her crown already, he began, then added, it's not forbidden to name each shade here. Abstinence has eaten away our faces, and he pointed out, this is Bonagiunta da Lucca. The one beyond him, even more emaciated than the rest, had clasped the holy church. He was from Tours. His fast purges Bolsena's eels, Vernaccia's wine. And he named many others, one by one, and at their naming they all seemed content, so that, for this, no face was overcast. I saw their teeth were biting emptiness. Both Ubalden de la Pila and Boniface, who shepherded so many with his staff. I saw Messer Marchesi, who once had more ease, less dryness, drinking at Forli, and yet could never satisfy his thirst. But just as he who looks and then esteems one more than the others, so did I prize him of Lucca, for he seemed to know me better. He murmured something like Gentuca, was what I heard from the place where he could feel the wound of justice that denuded them so. O soul, I said, who seems so eager to converse with me, do speak so that I hear you, for speech may satisfy both you and me. He answered, although men condemn my city, there's a woman born. She wears no veil, and yet, because of whom you'll find it pleasing. You are to journey with this prophecy, and if there's something in my murmuring you doubt, events themselves will bear me out. But tell me if the man whom I see here is he who brought the new rhymes forth, beginning, ladies who have intelligence of love. I answered, I am one who, when love breathes in me, takes note. What he within dictates, I, in that way, without, would speak and shape. Oh, brother, now I see, he said, the knot that kept the notary, Guitone, and me short of the sweet new manner that I hear. I clearly see how your pens flow closely behind him who dictates, and certainly that did not happen with our pens, and he who sets himself to ferreting profoundly can find no other difference between the two styles. He fell still, contentedly. Even as birds that winter on the Nile at times will slow and form a flock in the air, then speed their flight and form a file, so all the people who were there moved much more swiftly, turning away their faces, hurrying their pace because of leanness and desire. and just as he who's tired of running lets his comrades go ahead and slows his steps until he's eased the panting of his chest, so did Pharesi let that holy flock pass by more and more, behind with me, saying, "How long before I shall see you again?" "I do not know," I said, "how long I'll live, and yet, however quick is my return, my longing for these shores would have me here sooner, because the place where I was set to live is day by day deprived of good, and seems along the way to wretched ruin." "Do not be vexed," he said, "for I can see the guiltiest of all dragged by a beast's tail to the valley where no sin is purged. At every step the beast moves faster, always gaining momentum till it smashes him and leaves his body squalidly undone. Those wheels," and here he looked up at the sky, "do not have long to turn before you see plainly what I can't tell more openly. Now you remain behind, for time is costly here in this kingdom. I should lose too much by moving with you thus at equal pace. Just as a horseman sometimes gallops out, leaving behind his troop of riders, so that he may gain the honor of the first clash, so with longer strides did he leave us, and I remained along my path with those two who were such great marshals of the world. And when he'd gone so far ahead of us that my eyes strained to follow him, just as my mind was straining after what he'd said, the branches of another tree, heavy with fruit, alive with green, appeared to me nearby, just past a curve where I had turned. Beneath the tree I saw shades lifting hands, crying I know not what up towards the branches, like little eager, empty-headed children, who beg, but he of whom they beg does not reply, but to provoke their longing, he holds high and does not hide the thing they want. Then they departed as if disabused, and we immediately reached the great tree, which turns aside so many prayers and tears. Continue on, but don't draw close to it. There is a tree above from which Eve ate, and from that tree above this plant was raised. Among the boughs, a voice, I know not whose, spoke so. Thus, drawing closer, Virgil, Statius, and I edged on along the side that rises. It said, "Remember those with double chests, the miserable ones, born of the clouds, whom Theseus battled when they gorged themselves, those whom Gideon refused as comrades, those Hebrews who had drunk too avidly when he came down the hills to Midian." So, keeping close to one of the road's margins, we moved ahead, hearing of gluttony, its sins repaid by sorry penalties. Then, with more space along the lonely path, 1,000 steps more had brought us forward, each of us meditating wordlessly. "What are you thinking of, you three who walk alone?" a sudden voice called out, at which I started like a scared young animal. I raised my head to see who it might be. No glass or metal ever seen within the furnace was so glowing or so red. As one I saw who said, "If you ascend, then you must turn at this point, for whoever would journey unto peace must pass this way." But his appearance had deprived me of my sight, so that, as one who uses hearing as guide, I turned and followed my two teachers. And like the breeze of May that, heralding the dawning of the day, when it is steeped in flowers and in grass, stirs fragrantly, so did I feel the wind that blew against the center of my brow, and clearly sensed the movement of his wings, the air's ambrosia. And then I heard, "Blessed are those whom grace illuminates so that in their breasts the love of taste does not awaken too much desire, whose hungering is always in just measure." Canto 25, Purgatorio. The hour when climbers cannot pause had come. The sun had left to Taurus the meridian, and night had left it to the Scorpion. Therefore, like one who would not stop, but moves along his path, no matter what he sees, if he is goaded by necessity, we made our way into the narrow gap, and, one behind the other, took the stairs so straight that climbers there must separate. And as the fledgling stork will lift its wings because it wants to fly, but dares not try to leave the nest, and lets its wing drop back, so I, with my desire to question kindled and spent, arrived as far as making ready to speak. But my dear father, though our steps were hurrying, did not stop talking, for he said, "The iron of the arrows touched the longbow, let the shaft of speech fly off." Then I had the confidence enough to open my mouth and ask him, "How can one grow lean where there is never need for nourishment? If you recall how Meleager was consumed," he said, "just when the firebrand was spent, this won't be hard to understand. And if you think how, though your body is swift, your image in the mirror captures it, then what perplexed will seem to you transparent. But that your will to know may be appeased, here is Statius, and I call on him and ask that he now be the healer of your doubts." "If I explain eternal ways to him," Statius replied, "while you are present here, let my excuse be, I cannot refuse you." Then he began, "If, son, your mind receives and keeps my words, then what I say will serve as light upon the how that you have asked. The thirsty veins drink up the perfect blood, but not all of that blood. A portion's left, like leavings that are taken from the table. Within the heart, the part acquires power to form another's human limbs, as blood that flows through veins feeds on one's own limbs. Digested yet again, that part descends to what is best not named. From there it drips into the natural receptacle." Oh no, not again. Okay, hiccup, false alarm. "Upon another's blood, the two bloods mix, one ready to be passive and one active, because a perfect place, the heart, prepared them. The active, having reached the passive, starts to work. First it coagulates, and then quickens, the matter it has made more dense, having become a soul, much like a plant, though with this difference, a plant's complete, whereas a fetus is still journeying. The active virtue labors so the fetus may move and feel, like a sea sponge, and then it starts to organize the powers it seeded. At this point, son, the power that had come from the begetter's heart unfolds and spreads, that nature may see every limb perfected." But how the animal becomes a speaking being, you've not yet seen. This point's so hard, it led one wiser than you are to err. In separating from the possible intellect the soul, since he could not see no organ for the mind, so did he teach. Open your heart to truth. We now have reached and know that, once the brain's articulation within the fetus has attained perfection, then the first mover turns towards it with joy on seeing so much art in nature, and breathes into it new spirit, vigorous, which draws all that is active in the fetus into its substance and becomes one soul that lives and feels and has self-consciousness. That what I say may leave you less perplexed. Consider the sun's heat that, combined with sap that flows from vines, is then made wine. And when lachesis lacks more thread, then souls divided from the flesh, potentially it bears with it the human and divine. But with the human powers mute, the rest, intelligence and memory and will, are more acute in action than they were. With no delay, the soul falls of itself, astonishingly, on one of two shores. There it learns, early, what way it will journey. There, once the soul is circumscribed by space, the power that gives form irradiates as much as once it forms live limbs. And even as a saturated air, since it reflects the rays the sun has sent, takes rainbow colors as its ornament, so there will where the soul is stopped, the nearby air takes on the form of that soul impressed on it, a shape that is, potentially, real body. And then just as flame will follow after the fire whenever fire moves, so that new form becomes the spirit's follower. Since from that airy body it takes on its semblance, that soul is called shade. That shape forms organs for each sense, even for sight. This airy body lets us speak and laugh. With it we form the tears and sigh the sighs that you, perhaps, have heard around this mountain. Just as we are held fast by longings and by other sentiments, our shade takes form. This is the cause of your astonishment. By now we'd reached the final turning. We would meet. By now we reached the final turning we would meet and took the pathway right, at which we were preoccupied with other cares. There, from the wall, the mountain hurls its flames, but from the terrace side, there whirls a wind that pushes back the fire and limits it. Thus, on the open side, proceeding one by one, we went. I feared the fire on the left and on the right to the precipice. My guide said, "On this terrace, it is best to curb your eyes. The least distraction, left or right, can mean a step you will regret." Then from the heart of the great conflagration, I heard, "Sume Deus Clementi, Clementi," sung, and it was not less keen to turn my eyes, and I saw spirits walking in the flames, so that I looked at them and at my steps, sharing the time I had to look at each. After they'd reached the hymn's end, "Virum non cognosco," were the words they cried aloud. Then they began the hymn in a low voice. Again and done again they cried. Diana kept to the woods and banished Helice after she felt the force of Venus' poison. Then they returned to singing, and they praised aloud the wives and husbands who were chaste, as virtue and as matrimony mandate. That is, I think, the way these spirits act as long as they are burned by fire. This is the care, and this the nourishment with which one has to heal the final wound of all. Canto 26, Purgatorio. While we moved at the edge, one first, one after, I could often hear my gentle master saying, "Take care, and do not waste my warning." The sun, its rays already altering the coloring of all the west from azure to white, was striking me on my right shoulder. And where my shadow fell, made the flames seem more inflamed, and I saw many shades walking, intent upon a sight so strange. This was the reason that first prompted them to speak to me. Among themselves they said, "He does not seem to have a fictive body." Then certain of them came as close to me as they were able to, while, cautiously, they never left the boundaries of their burning. "O you who move behind the others, not because of sloth, but reverence perhaps, give me who burn and thirst and fire your answer." I'm not alone in needing your response, for all these shades thirst so for it, more than an Indian or Ethiopian thirsts for cool water. Tell us how you can, and if you're not yet caught within death's net, make of yourself a wall against the sun. Thus one of them had spoken to me. I should now have answered clearly, had I not been fixed on something strangely evident. For in the middle of the burning path came people moving opposite to these, and I, since they moved left, stared in suspense. There, on all sides, I can see every shade move quickly to embrace another shade. Content, they did not pause with their brief greeting, as ants in their dark company will touch their muzzles each to each, perhaps to seek news of their fortunes and their good journeyings. No sooner is their friendly greeting done Then each shade tries to outcry all the rest even before he starts to move ahead. The new group shouting Sodom and Gomorrah, the other that the bull may hurry towards her lust. Pasiphae hides in the cow. Then, just like cranes of whom apart to flee the sun, fly north to the Riphean mountains, while the rest, to flee the frost, fly towards the sands. One group moves with, the other opposite, us, and they return with tears to their first chance, and to the shout appropriate to each. And those who had entreated me came close again, in the same way they'd done before. Their faces showed how keen they were to listen. I, seeing their desire once again, began, O souls who can be sure of gaining the state of peace, whenever that may be, my limbs, mature or green, have not been left within the world beyond. They're here with me, together with their blood and their bones. That I be blinded no longer, through this place I pass. Above, a lady has gained grace for me. Therefore, I bear my mortal body across your world, so that your deepest longing soon be appeased, and you be lodged within the heavens that's most full of love, most spacious. Please tell it me, so that I may yet transcribe it among my pages. You who are, and what crowd moves in the direction opposite? Each shade displayed no less astonishment or less confusion than a mountaineer, who, even as he stares about, falls silent, when rough and rustic he comes to the city. But when they'd set aside astonishment, that's soon subdued in noble hearts. He who had questioned me before began again. Blessed are you who would, in order to die better, store experience of our lands. The people moving opposite us shared the sin for which once, while in triumph, Caesar heard Queen called out against him. That is why, as they move off from us, they cry out Sodom, reproaching their own selves as you have heard, and through their shame abet the fire's work. Our sin was with the other sex, but since we do not keep the bounds of human law, but served our appetites like beasts when we part from the other ranks, we then repeat, to our disgrace, the name of one who, in the bestial planks, became herself a beast. You now know why we act so, and you know what our sins were. If you would know our names, time is too short, and I don't know them all. But with regard to me, I'll satisfy your wish to know. I am Guido Guinizelli, purged here because I grieved before my end. As after the sad raging of Lycurgus, 2 sons finding their mother had embraced her, so I desired to, but dared not to, when I heard him declare his name, the father of me and of the others, those, my betters, who ever used sweet, gracious rhymes of love. And without hearing, speaking, pensive, I walked on, still gazing at him, a long time, prevented by the fire from drawing closer. When I had fed my sight on him, I offered myself, with such a pledge that others must believe, completely ready for his service. And he to me, because of what I hear, you leave a trace within me, one so clear, Lethe itself can't blur or cancel it. But if your words have now sworn truthfully, do tell me why it is that you have shown in speech and gaze that I am dear to you. And I to him, it is your sweet lines that, for as long as modern usage lasts, will still make dear their very inks. Brother, he said, he there, whom I point out to you, he showed us one who walked ahead. He was a better artisan of the mother tongue, surpassing all those who wrote their poems of love or prose romances. Let the stupid ones contend, who think that from Limoges there came the best. They credit rumor rather than truth, allowing their opinion to be set before they hear what art or reason says. So many of our fathers once persisted, voice after voice, and giving to Guitone the prize. But then, with most, the truth prevailed. Now, if you are so amply privileged that you would be admitted to the cloister where Christ is abbot of the college, then pray say, for me, to him, a paternoster, that is, as much of it as those in this place need, since we have lost the power to sin. Then, to make place, perhaps, for those behind him, he disappeared into the fire, just as a fish through water plunges towards the bottom. Saying that my desire was making ready a place of welcome for his name, I moved ahead a little, toward the one who had been pointed out to me, and he spoke freely. So, does your courteous request please me? I neither could nor would conceal myself from you. I am Arnaut, who, going, weep and sing with grief. I see my former folly. With joy, I see the hoped-for day draw near. Now by the power that conducts you to the summit of the stairway, I pray you, remember at this time my pain. Then in the fire that refines, he hid. Canto 27, Purgatorio. Just as there where its maker shed his blood, sun shed its final rays, its first rays, and Ebro lay beneath high Libra, and the ninth hour's rays were scorching the Ganges' waves, so here the sun stood at the point of day's departure when God's angel, happy, showed himself to us. He stood along the edge, beyond the flames, singing Beati Mundo Corde, in a voice that had more life than ours can claim. Then, holy souls, you cannot move ahead unless the fire has stung you first. Enter the flames, and don't be deaf to song you'll hear beyond, he said when we were close to him. And when I heard him say this, I became like one who had laid within the grave. I joined my hands and stretched them out to fend the flames, watching the fire, imagining clearly the human bodies I'd once seen burning. My gentle escorts turned to me, and Virgil said, "My son, though there may be suffering here, there is no death. Remember, if I've guided you to safety, even upon the back of Gurion, then now, closer to God, what shall I do?" "Hydrate? Sure thing. Thanks, Vlad. Welcome on in." Be sure, although you were to spend a full 1,000 years within this fire's center, your head would not be balder by one hair. And if you think I am deceiving you, draw closer to the flames. Let your own hands try out within the fire. Your clothing's hem, put down. By now put down your every fear. Turn towards the fire and enter. Be confident. But I was stubborn, set against my conscience. When he saw me still halting, obstinate, he said, somewhat perplexed, "Now, see, son, this wall stands between you and your Beatrice." As, at the name of this bee, Pyramus, about to die, opened his eyes and saw her, when the mulberry became blood red. So, when my stubbornness had softened, I, hearing the name that's always flowering within my mind, turned to my knowing guide. At which he shook his head and said, "And would you have us stay along this side?" Then smiled, as one smiles at a child fruit, as beguiled. Then he, ahead of me, entered the fire. and he asked Adius, who would walk between us before diving us, to go behind. No sooner was I in that fire than I had thrown myself in molten glass to find coolness, because those flames were so intense. My gentle father who had come for me kept talking, as we walked, of Beatrice, saying, "I seem to see her eyes already." A voice that sang beyond us was our guide, and we, attentive to that voice, emerged just at the point where it began to climb. "Venite benedicti patris mei," it sang with a light that overcame me. I could not look at such intensity. "The sun departs," it added. "Evening comes. Don't stay your steps, but hurry on before the west grows dark." The path we took climbed straight within the rock, and its direction was such that, in front of me, my body blocked the rays of sun, already low behind us. And we had only tried a few steps when I and my sages sensed the sun had set, because the shadow I had cast was spent. Before one color came to occupy the sky in all of its immensity, and night was free to summon all its darkness. Each of us made one of those stairs his bed. The nature of the mountain had so weakened our power and desire to climb ahead. Like goats that, when they grazed, were swift and tameless along the mountain's peaks, but now are sated, and rest and ruminate while the sun blazes. Untroubled in the shadows, silently watching over the herdsman as he leans upon his staff and oversees their peace. Or like the herdsman in the open fields, spending the night beside his quiet flock, watching to see that no beast drives them off. Such were all three of us at that point. They were like the herdsman. I was like the goat. Upon each side of us, high rock walls rose. From there, one saw but little of the sky, but in that little, I could see the stars, brighter and larger than they usually are. But while I watched the stars in reverie, sleep overcame me. Sleep which often sees, before it happens, what is yet to be. It was the hour, I think, when Cytherea, who always seems aflame with fires of love, first shines upon the mountains from the east, that in my dream I seemed to see a woman, both young and fair. Along a plain she gathered flowers, and even as she sang, she said, "Whoever asks my name, know that I am Leah." And I apply my lonely fans to fashion a garland of the flowers I have gathered. To find delight within this mirror I adorn myself, whereas my sister Rachel never deserts her mirror. There she sits all day. She longs to see her fair eyes gazing, as I, to see my hands adorning, long. She is content with seeing, I with labor. And now with the reflected lights that glow before the dawn and, rising, are most welcomed pilgrims as, returning, they are near home. The shadows fled upon all sides. My steps fled with them, and at this I woke and saw the great teachers have already risen. Today your hungerings will find their peace. Through that sweet fruit the care of mortals seeks among so many branches. This, the speech, the solemn words that Virgil spoke to me, and there were never tidings to compare, and offering delight to me with these. My will on will to climb above was such that at each step I took I felt the force within my wings was growing for the flight. There's a lot of tongue twisters in this chunk of the book. When all the staircase lay beneath us, and we reached this highest step, then Virgil set his eyes insistently on me and said, My son, you have seen the temporary fire and the eternal fire. You have reached the place which my powers cannot see. I've brought you here through intellect and art. From now on, let your pleasure be your guide. You're past the steep and past the narrow paths. Look at the sun that shines upon your brow. Look at the grasses, flowers, and the shrubs born here spontaneously of the earth. Among them you can rest or walk until the coming of the glad and lovely eyes, those eyes that, weeping, sent me to your side. Await no further word or sign from me. Your will is free, erect and whole. To act against that will would be to err, and therefore I crown and mitre you over to yourself. I crown and mitre you over yourself. Canto 28, Purgatorio. Now keen to search within, to search around the forest, dense, alive with green, divine, which tempered the new day before my eyes without delay. I left behind the rise and took the plain, advancing slowly, slowly across the ground where every part was fragrant. A gentle breeze, which did not seem to vary within itself, was striking at my brow, but with no greater force than a kind wind's, a wind that made the trembling boughs. They all bent eagerly, incline in the direction of morning shadows from the holy mountain. But they were not deflected with such force as to disturb the little birds upon the branches in the practice of their arts. Or too the leaves, with song, birds welcomed those first hours of the morning joyously, and leaves supplied the burning to their rhymes. Just like the wind that sounds from branch to branch along the shore of Clace, through the pines where the Aeolus has set the sirocco loose. Now, though my steps were slow, I'd gone so far into the ancient forest that I could no longer see where I had made my entry, and there I came upon a stream that blocked the path of my advance. Its little waves bent to the left to the grass along its banks. All of the purest waters here on earth, when matched against that stream, would seem to be touched by impurity. It hides no thing, that stream, although it moves dark, dark beneath the never-ending shadows, which allow no ray of sun or moon to reach those waters. I halted, and I set my eyes upon the farther bank to look at the abundant variety of newly flowered boughs. And there, just like a thing that, in appearing most suddenly, repels all other thoughts, so great is the astonishment it brings, I saw a solitary woman moving, singing, and gathering up flower on flower, the flowers that colored all her pathway. I pray you, lovely lady, you who warm yourself with rays of love, if I may trust your looks, which often evidence that at the heart. May it please you, I ask of her, to move ahead and closer to this river, so that I may understand what you are singing. You have reminded me of where and what, just when her mother was deprived of her, and she deprived of spring. Proserpina was. And when she turns, a woman, dancing, keeps her soles close to the ground and to each other, and scarcely lets one foot precede the other. So did she turn upon the little red and yellow flowers, to me no differently than would a virgin, lowering chaste eyes. I had beseeched, and I was satisfied, for she approached so close that the sweet sound that reached me then became intelligible. Please, Dante, you have a wife. You have Beatrice. No sooner had she reached the point where that fair river's waves could barely bathe the grass, and she gave me this gift, lifting her eyes. I did not think a light so bright had shone beneath the lids of Venus when her sun pierced her in extraordinary fashion. Erect along the farther bank she smiled, her hands entwining vari-colored flowers, which that high land, eating no seed, engendered. The river kept us just 3 steps apart, but even Hellespont, where Xerxes crossed, the case that still curbs all men's arrogance, did not provoke more hatred in Leander. Did not provoke more hatred in Leander when rough seas ran from Abydos to Sestos than hatred I bestowed upon that river when it refused to open. She began, "You are new here, and may, because I smile in this place, chosen to be mankind's nest." Wonder, perplexed, unable to detect the cause, but light to clear your intellect, is in the psalm beginning, Delicancy. Delectasi. Delectasti. And you, who have stepped forward, who beseeched me, tell me if you'd hear more. I have come ready for all your questions till you're satisfied. I said, the water and the murmuring forest contend in me against the recent credence I gave word to words denying their existence. At this, she said, I'll tell you how the source of your amazement has its special cause. I'll clear the cloud that's left you so distraught. The highest good, whose sole joy is himself, made man to be and to enact good. He gave man this place as pledge of endless peace. Man's fault made brief his stay here, and man's fault made him exchange frank laughter and sweet sport for lamentation and for anxiousness. Below this mountain, land and water vapors, which follow heat as far as they are able, produce their perturbations. Prevent them from molesting man, placed here. This mountain rose up this close to heaven. From the point where its gate locks, it's free of such disturbance. Now, since all of the atmosphere revolves within a circle, moved by the first circling, unless its round is broken at some point, against this height, which stands completely free within the living air, that motion strikes. And since these woods are dense, they echo it. And when a plant is struck, its power is such that it impregnates air with seeding force. The air, revolving, casts the seed abroad, the other hemisphere. Depending on the nature of its land and sky, conceives and bears from diverse powers, diverse trees. If what I said were known, you would not need to be amazed on earth when growing things take root, but have no seed that can be seen. And you must know the holy plain on which you find yourself is full of every seed, and it has fruit that there cannot be gathered. The water that you see does not spring from a vein that vapor, cold condensed, restores, like rivers that acquire or lose their force. It issues from a pure and changeless fountain, which by the will of God regains as much as, on two sides, it pours and it divides. On this side it descends with power to end one's memory of sin, and on the other, it can restore recall of each good deed. On one side it is Lethe, and on the other, Eunoe. Neither stream is efficacious unless the other's waters have been tasted. Their savior is above all other sweetness. Although your thirst might well be satisfied even if I revealed no more to you. I'll give you freely, too, a corollary, nor do I think my words will be less welcome to you if they extend beyond my promise. Those ancients who in poetry presented the golden age, who sang its happy state, perhaps in their Parnassus dreamt this place. Here, mankind's root was innocent, and here, where every fruit and never-ending spring, these streams, the nectar of which poets sing. Then I turned round completely, and I faced my poets. I could see that they had heard with smiles this final corollary spoken. That done, my eyes returned to the fair woman. Canto 29, Purgatorio. Her words were done, but without interruption she sang, like an enamored woman, thus, Beati quorum tecta sunt peccata. And just as nymphs who used to walk alone among the woodland shadows, some desiring to see, and some to flee the sun. So she moved countercurrent, as she walked along the riverbank, and following her short footsteps with my own steps, I matched her pace. Her steps and mine together did not sum 100 within the banks, still parallel, so curved about that I was facing east. Nor had we gone much farther on that path when she turned fully round towards me and said, "My brother, look and listen." And I saw a sudden radiance that swept across the mighty forest on all sides, and I was wondering if lightning had not struck. But since when lightning strikes, it stops at once, while that light, lingering, increased its force, within my mind I asked, "What thing is this?" And through the incandescent air there ran a sweet melody, at which just indignation made me rebuke the arrogance of Eve. Because where earth and heaven were obedient, a solitary woman, just created, found any veil at all beyond endurance. If she had been devout beneath her veil, I should have savored those ineffable delights before, and for a longer time. While I moved on, completely wrapped among so many first fruits of eternal pleasure, and longing for still greater joys, the air before us altered underneath the green branches, becoming like an ardent fire, and now the sweet sound was distinctly sung. O virgins, sacrosanct, if I have ever, for your sake, suffered vigils, cold and hunger, great need makes me entreat my recompense. Now Helicorn must pour its fountains for me. Urania must help me with their choir, to put in verses things hard to conceive. Not far beyond, we made out 7 trees of gold. Through the long stretch of air between those trees and us had falsified their semblance. But when I drawed so close that things perceived through mingled senses, which delude, did not, now they were nearer, lose their real features. The power that offers reason mattered judged those trees to be what they were, candelabra. And what those voices sang to be Hosanna. The upper part of those fair candles flamed more radiantly than the mid-month moon shines at midnight in an untroubled sky. Full of astonishment I turned my good Virgil, but he only answered me with eyes that were no less amazed than mine. Then I looked at the extraordinary things that were moving towards us, but so quickly that even brides just wed would move more quickly. The woman chided me. Why are you only so eager to behold the living lights and not in seeing what comes after them? Then I saw people following those candles, as if behind their guides, and they wore whiteness that, in this world, has never been. The water, to my left, reflected flames, and it reflected, too, my left-hand side, if I gazed into it as in a mirror. When I was at a point along my shore, where all that sundered me from them was water, I stayed my steps in order to see better, and I could see the candle flames move forward, leaving the air behind them colored like the strokes of a painter's brush might have described, so that the air above that retinue was streaked with 7 bands in every hue, of which the rainbows made a Delia's girdle. These pennants stretched far back beyond my vision. As for the width they filled, I judged the distance between the outer ones to be 10 paces. Beneath the handsome sky I have described 24 elders moved on, 2 by 2, and they had wreaths of lilies on their heads. And all were singing, "You among the daughters of Adam, benedicta are, and may your beauties blessed be eternally." After the flowers and the other plants facing me, along the farther shore had seen those chosen people disappear. Then, As is in heaven, star will follow star. The elders gone, 4 animals came on, and each of them had green leaves as his crown. Each had 6 wings as plumage, and those plumes were full of eyes. They would be very like the eyes of Argus, were his eyes alive. Reader, I am not squandering more rhymes in order to describe their forms, since I must spend elsewhere. I can't be lavish here, but read Ezekiel, where he has drawn those animals approaching from the north, with wings in cloud and fire. He painted them. And just as you will find them in his pages, such were they here, except that John's with me. As to their wings, with him, John disagrees. The space between the 4 of them contained a chariot, triumphal on 2 wheels, tied to a griffin's neck and drawn by him. His wings stretched upward, framed by the middle band with 3 bands on each outer side, so that, through the cleaved air, he left the bands intact. His wings, so high that they were lost to sight, his limbs were gold as far as he was bird. And the rest of him was white, mixed with blood red. Not only did no chariot so handsome gladden Rome's Africanus, or Augustus himself, even the sun's own cannot match it. The sun's, which, gone astray, was burnt to cinders because earth offered up her pious prayers. When joy, in ways not known to us, was just, when Jove. Three circling women then advanced, dancing at the right wheel, the first of them, so red that even in a flame she'd not be noticed. The second seemed as if her flesh and bone were fashioned out of emerald, and the third seemed to be newly fallen snow. And now the white one seemed to lead them, now the red, and from the way in which the leader chanted, the others took their place, now slow, now rapid. Upon the left, 4 other women, dressed in crimson, danced, depending on the cadence of one of them, with 3 eyes in her head. Behind all of the group I have described, I saw 2 elders, different in their dress, but like in manner, grave and decorous. The first seemed to be one of the disciples of the great Hippocrates, whom nature made for those who are her dearest living beings. The other showed an opposite concern. His sword was bright and sharp, and even on the near side of the river, I felt fear. Then I saw 4 of humble aspect, and when all the rest had passed, a lone man, his features keen, advanced, as if in sleep. The clothes these 7 wore were like the elders in the first file, except that these had no garlands of lilies round their brow. Instead, roses and other red flowers wreathed their heads. One seeing them less closely would have sworn that all of them had flames above their eyebrows. And when the chariot stood facing me, I heard a bolt of thunder. It seemed to block the path of that good company, which halted there, its emblems in the lead. Canto 30, Purgatorio. When the first heaven's 7 stars had halted, those stars that never rise or set, that are not veiled except when sin clouds our vision, those stars that, there, made everyone aware of what his duty was, just as the bear below brings helmsman home to the harbor. Then the truthful band that had come first between the griffin and the 7 stars turned towards the chariot as towards their peace. And one of them, as if sent down from heaven, hymned aloud, Veni sponsa de Libano, 3 times, and all the others echoed him. Just as the blessed at the final summons will rise up, ready, each out of his grave, singing, with new-clothed voices, Alleluia. So, from the godly chariot, eternal life's messengers and ministers arose. 100 stood ad vocem tanti senis. All of them cried, Benedictus qui venus, and scattering flowers upward and around, Manibus o date ilia plenis. Is it Ilia? Or is it Lilia? Lilia plenis. I have at times seen all the eastern sky becoming rose as day began, and seen adorn in lovely blue the rest of heaven, and seen the sun's face rise so veiled that it was tempered by the mist and could permit the eye to look at length upon it. So, within a cloud of flowers that were cast by the angelic hands, and then rose up, then fell back outside and in the chariot, a woman showed herself to me. Above a white veil, she was crowned with olive bows. Her cape was green, her dress beneath flame red. Within her presence I had once been used to feeling, trembling, wonder, disillusion, but that was long ago. Still, though my soul, now she was veiled, could not see her directly by way of hidden force that she could not move, I felt the mighty power of old love. As soon as that deep force had struck my vision, the power that, when I had not yet left my boyhood, had already transfixed me, I turned around, and to my left, just as a little child, afraid or in distress, will hurry to its mother, anxiously. I say to Virgil, I am left with less than 1 drop of my blood that does not tremble. I recognize the signs of the old flame. But Virgil had deprived us of himself. Virgil, the gentlest father, Virgil, he to whom I gave myself for my salvation. And even all our ancient mother lost was not enough to keep my cheeks, though washed with dew, from darkening again with tears. Dante, though Virgil's leaving you, do not yet weep. Do not weep yet. You'll need your tears for when another sword he must yet inflict. Just like an admiral who goes to stern and prow to see the officers who guide the other ships, encouraging their tasks. So, on the left side of the chariot, I turned around when I heard my name, which of necessity I describe here. I saw the lady who had first appeared to me beneath the vigils of the angelic flowers look at me across the stream. Although the veil she wore, down from her head, which was encircled by Minerva's leaves, did not allow her to be seen distinctly, her stance still regal and disdainful, she continued, just as one who speaks, but keeps until the end the fiercest parts of the speech. Look here, for I am Beatrice. I am. How are you able to ascend the mountain? Did you not know that man is happy here? My lowered eyes caught sight of the clear stream, but when I saw myself reflected there, such shame weighed on my brow. My eyes drew back and towards the grass. Just as a mother seems harsh to her child, so did she seem to me. How bitter is the savor of stern pity. Her words were done. The angels suddenly sang, In te, Domine, speravi. But their singing did not go past pedes meos. Even as snow among the sap-filled trees along the spine of Italy will freeze when gripped by gusts of the Slavonian winds. Then, as it melts, will trickle through itself. That is, if winds breathe north from shadeless lands, just as beneath the flame the candle melts. So I, before I had heard the song of those whose notes always accompany the notes of the eternal spheres, was without tears and sighs. But when I heard the sympathy for me within their gentle harmonies, as if they said, "Lady, why shame him so?" Then did the ice that had restrained my heart become water and breathe breath. And from my breast and through my lips and eyes they issued, anguished. Still standing motionless upon the left side of the chariot, she then addressed the angels who had been compassionate. "You are awake in never-ending day, and neither night nor sleep can steal from you. One step the world would take along its way. Therefore I am more concerned that my reply be understood by him who weeps beyond, so that his sorrow's measure matches sin. Not only through work of the great spheres which guide each seed to a determined end, depending on what stars are its companions, but through the bounty of the godly graces, which shower down from clouds so high that we cannot approach them with our vision. He, when young, was such, potentially, that any propensity innate in him would have prodigiously succeeded, had he acted. But where the soil has finer vigor, there, precisely, when untilled or badly seeded, will that terrain grow wilder and more noxious. My countenance sustained him for a while. Showing my youthful eyes to him, I led him with me towards the way of righteousness. As soon as I, upon the threshold of my second age, had changed my life, he took himself away from me, and followed after another, when, from flesh to spirit, I had risen, and my goddess and my beauty had grown. I was less dear to him, less welcome. He turned his footsteps toward an untrue path. He followed counterfeits of goodness, which will never pay in full what they have promised. Nor did the inspirations I receive, with which, in dream and otherwise, I called him back, "Help me!" He paid so little heed. He fell so far there was no other means to lead him to salvation except this, to let him see the people who were lost. For this I visited the gateway of the dead. To him who guided him above, my prayers were offered even as I wept. The deep design of God would have been broken if Lethe had been crossed and he had drunk such waters, but he had not discharged the debt of penitence that's paid when tears are shed. All right, final three. Canto 31, Purgatorio. O you, upon the holy stream's far shore, so she, turning her speech's point against me, even its edge had seemed too sharp, began again, without allowing interruption. Tell if this is true, for your confession must be entwined with such self-accusation. My power of speech was so confounded that my voice would move, and it was spent before its organs had released it. She forebode a moment. Then she said, "What are you thinking? Reply to me. The water has not yet obliterated your sad memories." Confusion mixed with fear compelled a yes out of my mouth. And yet that yes was such, one needed eyes to make out what it was. Just as a crossbow that is drawn too taut snaps both its cord and bow when it is shot, and arrow meets its mark with feeble force. So, caught breath, that heavy weight, I burst, and I let tears and sighs pour forth. My voice had lost its life along its passage out. At this she said, "In the desire for me, that was directing you to love the good. Beyond which, there's no thing to draw our longing. What chains were strung? What ditches dug across your path that, once you'd come upon them, caused your loss of any hope of moving forward? What benefits and what allurements were so evident upon the brow of others that you had need to promenade before them? Promenade. After I had withheld a bitter sigh, I scarcely had the voice for my reply, but, laboring, my lips gave my words form. Weeping, I answered. Mere appearances turned me aside with their false loveliness, as soon as I had lost your countenance. And she, had you been silent or denied what you confess, your guilt would not be less in evidence. It's known by such a judge. When the charge of sinfulness has burst from one's own cheek, then in our court the whetstone turns and blunts our blade's own cutting edge. Nevertheless, that you may feel more shame for your mistake, and that, in time to come, hearing the sirens, you may become strong, you may be more strong. Have done with all the tears you sowed, and listen, so shall you hear now how, unto other ends, my buried flesh should have directed you. Nature or art had never shown you any beauty that matched the lovely limbs in which I was enclosed, limbs scattered now in dust. And if the highest beauty failed you through my death, what mortal thing could then induce you to desire it? For when the first arrow of things deceptive struck you, then you surely should have lifted up your wings to follow me. No longer such a thing. No green young girl or other novelty, such brief delight, should have weighed down your wings, awaiting further shafts. The fledgling bird must meet 2 or 3 blows before he learns, but any full-fledged bird is proof against the net that had been spread or arrow aimed. As children, when ashamed, will stand, their eyes upon the ground, they listen, silently, acknowledging their fault repentantly. So did I stand, and she enjoyed me. Since hearing alone makes you grieve so, lift up your beard, and sight will bring you to greater tears. There's less resistance in the sturdy oak to its uprooting by a wind from lands of ours or lands of Larbas than I showed in lifting up my chin at her command. I knew quite well when she said beard, but meant my face, the poison in her argument. When I had raised my face upright, my eyes were able to perceive that the first creatures had paused and were no longer scattering flowers. And still uncertain of itself, my vision saw Beatrice turn towards the animal that is, with its 2 natures, but 1 person. Beneath her veil, beyond the stream, she seemed so to surpass her former self in beauty, as here on earth she had surpassed all others. The nettle of remorse so stung me then, that those among all other things that once most lured my love became the most hateful to me. Such self-indictment seized my heart that I collapsed. My senses slack, what I became is known to her who was the cause of it. Then when my heart restored my outer sense, I saw the woman who had found alone standing above me, saying, "Hold me, hold me. Hold me." She'd plunged me up to my throat in the river, and, drawing me behind her, she now crossed, light as a gondola along the surface. When I was near the blessed shore, I heard Aspergus, me, so sweetly sung that I cannot remember or much less transcribe it. The lovely woman opened wide her arms. She clasped my head, and then she thrust me under, to that point where I had to swallow water. That done, she drew me out and led me, bathed into the dance of the 4 lovely women, and each one placed her arm above my head. Here we are nymphs, in heaven stars. Before she had descended to the work, We were assigned as her handmaidens to Beatrice. We'll be your guides unto her eyes, but it will be the three beyond, who you see more deeply, who will help you penetrate her joyous light. So, singing, they began, then leading me together with them to the griffin's breast, where Beatrice turned toward us, stood. They said, "See that you are not sparing of your gaze. Before you we have set those emeralds from which love once had aimed its shafts at you." 1,000 longings burning more than flames compelled my eyes to watch the radiant eyes that, motionless, were still fixed on the griffin. Just like the sun within a mirror, so the double-natured creature gleamed within, now showing one, and now the other, guise. Consider, reader, if I did not wonder when I saw something that displayed no movement, those reflected image kept on changing, and while full of astonishment and gladness, my soul tasted the food, that food which, even as it quenches hunger, spurs the appetite. The other three, whose stance showed them to be the members of a higher troop, advanced, and to their chant they danced angelically. "Turn, Beatrice, oh turn your holy eyes upon your faithful one," their song beseeched, "who, that he might see you, has come so far. Out of your grace, do give us this grace. Unveil your lips to him, so that he may discern the second beauty you have kept concealed. O splendor of eternal living light, who's ever grown so pale beneath Parnassus's shade, or has drunk so deeply from its fountain, that he'd not seem to have his mind confounded, trying to render you as you appeared, where heaven's harmony was like your pale likeness, your face, seen through the air, unveiled completely." Canto 32, Purgatorio. My eyes were so insistent, so intent on finding satisfaction for their 10-year thirst that every other sense was spent. And to each side, my eyes were walled in by indifference to all else. With its old net, the holy smile so drew them to itself. When I was forced to turn my eyes leftward by those three goddesses, because I heard them warning me, "You stare too fixedly," and the condition that afflicts my sight when eyes have just been struck by the sun's force left me without my vision for a time. I'll taste a peeping Tom. But when my sight had become accustomed to lesser sensations, that is, lesser than the mighty force that made my eyes retreat, I saw the glorious army. It had wheeled around and to the right. It had turned east. It faced the seven flames and faced the sun, just as, protected by its shields, a squadron will wheel, to save itself, around its standard until all of its men have changed direction. So here all troops of the celestial kingdom within the vanguard passed in front of us, before the chariot swung around the pole shaft. Back to the wheels the ladies then returned, and though the griffin moved the blessed burden, when he did that, none of his feathers stirred. The lovely lady who had helped me form the lethe, and I, Stadius, following the wheel that turned right round the inner, smaller arc, were slowly passing through the tall woods. Empty, because of one who had believed the serpent, our pace was measured by angelic song. The space we covered could be matched, perhaps, by 3 flights of unleashed arrow shafts, when Beatrice descended from the chariot. Adam, I heard all of them murmuring, and then they drew around a tree, whose every branch had been stripped of flowers and of leaves. As it grows higher, so its branches spread wider, It reached a height that even in their forests would amaze the Indians. Blessed are you, whose beak does not, O Griffin, pluck the sweet-tasting fruit that is forbidden, and then afflicts the belly that has eaten. So round the robust tree, the other shouted, and the two-natured animal. Thus is the seed of every righteous man preserved. And turning to the pole shaft he had pulled, he drew it to the foot of the stripped tree, and with a branch of the tree, tied the two. Just like our plants that, when the great light falls on earth, mixed with the light that shines behind the stars of the celestial fishes, swell with buds. Each plant renews its coloring before the sun has yoked its steeds beneath another constellation. So the tree, whose boughs before had been so solitary, was now renewed, showing a tint that was less than a rose, more than a violet. I do not understand the hymn that they sung. It is not sung here on this earth, nor, drowsy, did I listen to the end. Could I describe just how the ruthless eyes whose long wakefulness cost them so dear, hearing the tale of Syrinx, fell asleep? Then, like a painter painting from a model, I draw the way in which I fell asleep. But I refrain. Let one more skillful paint. I move, therefore, straight to my waking time. I say that radiance rent the veil of sleep, and, as did a voice, rise up, what are you doing? Even as Peter, John, and James, when brought to see the blossoms of the apple tree, whose fruit abets the angels' hungering, providing endless wedding feasts in heaven, were overwhelmed by what they saw. But then, hearing the word that shattered deeper sleeps, arose and saw their fellowship was smaller, since Moses and Elijah now had left, and saw a difference in their teacher's dress. So I awoke and saw, standing above me, she who before, compassionate, had guided my steps along the riverbank. Completely bewildered, I asked, Where is Beatrice? And she, beneath the boughs that were renewed, she's seated on the root of that tree. See the company surrounding her. The rest have left behind the griffin they have climbed on high with song that is more sweet, more deep. I do not know if she said more than that, because by now I had in sight one who excluded all things other from my view. She sat alone upon the simple ground, left there as a guardian of the chariot. I'd seen the two-form animal tie fast. The 7 nymphs encircled her as garland, and in their hands they held the lamps that can not be extinguished by the north or south winds. Here you shall be, a while, a visitor, but you shall be with me, and without ends, Rome's citizen, the Rome in which Christ is Roman, and thus to profit that world which lives badly. Watch the chariot steadfastly, and when you have returned beyond, transcribe what you have seen. Thus Beatrice, and I, devoutly, at the feet of her commandments, set mind and eyes where she had wished me to. Never has lightning fallen with such swift motion from a thick cloud, when it descends from the most distant limit in the heavens, as did the bird of Jove that I saw swoop down through the tree, tearing the bark as well as the new leaves and the new flowering. It struck the chariot with all its force. The chariot twisted like a ship that's crossed by seas that now storm the starboard and now port. I then saw, as it leaped into the body of that a triumphal chariot, the fox, that seemed to lack all honest nourishment. But as she railed against its squalid sins, my lady forced that fox to flight as quick as, stripped of flesh, its bones permitted it. Then I could see the eagle plunge, again, down through the tree, into the chariot, and I leave it feathered with its plumage. And just like a voice from an embittered heart, a voice issued from heaven saying this: "O my small bark, your freight is wickedness." Then did the ground between the two wheels seem to me to open. From the earth a dragon emerged. It drove its tail up through the chariot, and, like a wasp when it retracts its sting, drawing its venomed tail back to itself, it dragged a part of the bottom off, and went its way, undulating. And what was left was covered with the eagle's plumes, perhaps offered with sound and kind intent, much as grass covers fertile ground. And the pole shaft and both wheels were recovered in less time than mouth must be kept open when one sighs. Transfigured so, the saintly instrument grew heads, which sprouted from its parts. 3 grew upon the pole shaft, and 1 at each corner. 3 were horned like oxen, but the 4 had just a single horn upon their foreheads. Such monsters have never been seen before, just like a fortress set on a steep slope, securely seated there, ungirt. A whore, whose eyes were quick to rove, appeared to me. And I saw at her side, erect, a giant, who seemed to serve as her custodian, and they, again, embraced each other. But when she turned her wandering, wanton eyes to me, and that ferocious amador beat her from head to foot, then, swollen with suspicion, fierce with anger, he untied the chariot made monster, dragging it into the wood so that I could not see either the whore or the strange chariot beast. Canto 33. Final Canto of Purgatorio. Weeping, the woman then began, now 3, now 4, alternatively, to psalm gently. Deus venerunt gentis. And at this, sighing and full of pity, Beatrice was changed. She listened, grieving a little less than Mary when, beneath the cross, she wept. But when the 7 virgins have completed their psalm, and she was free to speak, erect, her coloring like ardent fire, she answered, Marcum et non videbitis me et itrum. Sister is delightful to me, Marcum, et vos videbitis me. Then she sat all 7 nymphs in front of her, and signaled to me, the lady, and the sage who had remained to move behind her. So she advanced, and I do not believe that she has taken her 10th step upon the ground before her eyes had struck my eyes. And gazing tranquilly, Pray, come more quickly, she said to me, so that you are more ready to listen to me should I speak to you. As soon as I, responding to my duty, had joined her, she said, Brother, why not try, since now you're at my side, to query me, like those who, speaking to superiors too reverently, do not speak distinctly, not drawing their clear voice up to their teeth. So did I speak, with sounds too incomplete when I began. Lady, you know my need to know, and know how it can be appeased. And she to me, I'd have you disentangle yourself from this point on, from fear and shame, that you no longer speak like one who dreams. Know that the vessel which the serpent broke was and is not, but he whose fault it is may rest assured, God's vengeance fears no hindrance. The eagle that had left us its plumes within the chariot, which then became a monster and then a prey, will not forever be without an heir, for I can plainly see, and thus I tell it, stars already close at hand, which can't be blocked or checked, will bring a time in which, dispatched by God, 510 and 5 will slay the whore together with that giant who sins with her. And what I tell, as dark as Sphinx and Themis, may leave you less convinced, because, like these, it tires the intellect with quandaries. But soon events themselves will be the naiads that clarify the obstinate enigma, but without injury to grain or herds. Take note, and even as I speak these words, do you transmit them in your turn to those who live the life that is a race to death. And when you write them, keep in mind that you must not conceal what you have seen of the tree that now has been despoiled twice over here. Whoever robs or rends that tree offends with his blaspheming action God, for he created it for his sole use, holy. For tasting of that tree, the first soul waited 5,000 years and more in grief and longing for him, who on himself avenged that taste. Your intellect's asleep if it can't see how singular is the cause that makes the tree so tall and makes it grow invertedly. And if, like waters of the Elsa, your vain thoughts did not encrust your mind, if your delight in them were not like Pyramus, staining the mulberry, you recognize in that tree's form and height the moral sense God's justice had when he forbade trespass. But since I see your intellect is made of stone, and petrified, grown so opaque, the light of what I say has left you dazed. I'd also have you bear my words within you, if not inscribed, at least outlined, just as the pilgrim staff is brought back wreathed with palm. And I, even as wax the seal is impressed, where there is no alteration in the form, so does my brain now bear what you have stamped. Why does your desired word ascend so high above my understanding, that the more I try, the more I am denied, the more am I denied? That you may recognize, she said, the school that you have followed and may see if what it taught can comprehend what I have said, and see that, as the earth is distant from the highest and swiftest of the heavens, so distant is your way from the divine. And I replied to her, I don't remember making myself a stranger to you, nor does conscience gnaw at me because of that. And if you can't remember that, she answered, smiling, then call to mind how you, today, have drunk of Lethe. And if smoke is proof of fire, then it is clear we can conclude from this forgetfulness that in your will there was a fault. Your will had turned elsewhere. But from now on the words I speak will be naked. That is appropriate if they would be laid bare before your still crude sight. More incandescent now, with slower steps, the sun was pacing the meridian, which alters with the place from which it's seen. When, just as one who serves as escort for a group will halt if he has come upon things strange, or even traces of strangeness, the 7 ladies halted at the edge of a dense shadow such as mountains cast, beneath green leaves and black boughs on cold banks. In front of them, I seemed to see Euphrates and Tigris issuing from one same spring, and then, as friends do, separating slowly. O light, O glory of the human race, what water is this, flowing from one source and then becoming distant from itself? Her answer to what I asked was, ask Matilda to explain this. And the lovely lady, as one who frees herself from blame, replies, he's heard of this and other matters from me, and I'm sure that Lethe's waters have not obscured his memory of this. And Beatrice, perhaps some greater care which often weakens memory, has made his mind, in things regarding sight, grow dark. But see, you know as it flows from there, lead him to it, and, as you're used to doing, revive the power that is faint in him. As would the noble soul, which offers no excuse, but makes another's will its own, as soon as signs reveal that will, just so. When she had taken me, the lovely lady moved forward, and she said with womanly courtesy to Stadius, "Come with them." If, reader, I had ampler space in which to write, I'd sing, though incompetently, that sweet draught for which my thirst was limitless. But since all of the pages predisposed for this, the second canticle are full, the curb of art will not let me continue. From that most holy wave I now returned to Beatrice, remade, as new trees are renewed when they bring forth new boughs. I was pure and prepared to climb unto the stars. And that's Purgatorio, everybody. Oh, I'm exhausted from reading. We just get this up for next time? We'll be ready for Canto 1, Paradiso, next week.